All right, folks, welcome back. Organizational behavior, uh, Griffin and Phillips, 14th edition. Here we are, chapter 9, communication. Okay, learning outcomes. After studying this chapter, you should be able to describe the communication process, including the barriers to effective communication and how to effectively manage them, describe 3 broad types of communication, summarize the characteristics of successful communication, explain different types of communication barriers and how to overcome them, describe the richness of various types of communication media, describe the differences in communication styles. Okay, so we've got a pretty important chapter here because we all have to communicate every day in our life. Every time we interact with someone, we are communicating something to them. So this is something we all do, and might as well be better at it than we are now, right? Might as well get good at something that we have to do. And being good at it is probably pretty central to being successful in whatever job or position or relationship you have. Fair amount of communication in those. All right, communication process. What does it mean? Communication, our definition, transmission of information from one person to another to create shared understanding and feeling. And these are the different components of communication. So we've got encoding. That's converting a thought, idea, or fact into a message composed of symbols, pictures, or words. So the communicator, the person who's trying to communicate something, has to encode their thought or idea into some kind of message. That message can be in pictures, words. It can be sent through body language. It can be sent by the way we dress. Maybe want to impress someone for a job interview or a date. We dress a certain way. We communicate something to them. All right, message is the encoded information. Channel is the medium, right? So is it a text message? Is it voice? Is it video chat? Is it sign language? Is it a handwritten note? Is it a video that you've recorded and sent to someone? Decoding is translating the message back into something that can be understood by the receiver. Feedback is a check on the success of the communication. And noise is anything that blocks, distorts, or changes in any way the message the sender intended to communicate. Okay, so here's essentially all that stuff. And what you can see is at each step there's noise, which just means these are factors that are not included in our model. Noise is always a combination of factors that are not included in our model. So there could be noise from the message sender to how we encode it, right? Maybe we're distracted at the moment, so we encode it wrong, or confused, or tired, or angry, right? There's noise in the way we choose to send it, and there's a lot of noise here in terms of decoding and receiving. Feedback, maybe you don't give the person the feedback they want, or they're trying to give you a certain kind of feedback, but they indicate something else with their words, etc. So a nice little model to get a sense of communication process. Okay, so what are we talking about when we're talking about communication? Different types. Broadly speaking, we're talking about verbal and nonverbal. Verbal communication is communicating via spoken words or phrases. Typically happens in real time, but can be asynchronous. Intranet, this can happen via an intranet, an organization's private network through which employees securely communicate and collaborate. Sort of an internet, but it's just it's not connected to the outside internet. It's just a network of computers or whatnot. Verbal intonation, a big part of verbal communication. It's the emphasis we give to spoken words or phrases. Nonverbal communication is communications that are not spoken or written, but have meaning to others. And much of communication that happens is nonverbal. Body language is a big part of that. Facial expressions, tone of voice, that would be verbal intonation, facial expressions, body language, how we dress, things like that. Written communication, communication that occurs by digital, printed, or written words or symbols. Okay, Okay, this is a very important concept, especially for the guys out there. Women tend to naturally be a little bit better at that. Of course, not all women, not all men. It goes to everyone, but typically for probably a combination of genetic and social factors, men are not as good at listening. So active listening is when you're giving feedback to the person, you're saying things or nodding along, repeating things the person says to give them the sense that you're listening, right? So it's a purposeful involvement in listening to what others say and clarifying messages, meaning, and verbal cues. Engage in the process of capturing information, interpret and synthesize received information, react to information through cues, verbal and nonverbal. So it could be as simple as nodding along when someone is saying that. It could be I hear you, or it could be someone says, they tell you a story about how, what's been going on in their life, and you might say something like, wow, it sounds like you've had a really hard week. I'm sorry, that sucks. Or you restate what they're saying, or it sounds like you're saying your mom is being mean to you. And if that's what they're saying, they'll say, yeah. Or they might clarify. They might say, no, what I'm saying is I don't like it when my mom does this, not something. Um, Effective and acceptable feedback to a recipient is timely, frequent, consistent, specific, and private. Responding to feedback involves acknowledgement, agreement where applicable, request for details as necessary, and taking responsibility. So learning how to listen actively, this is also sometimes called reflective listening, because you're often reflecting back what the person is saying, is a very, very important communication skill. Okay, 9.3, characteristics of successful communication. Probably not every single one, but some useful ones: clarity, conciseness, consistency, and audience consideration. I think these are fairly self-explanatory. Our message to be clear as possible, right? An organized message that can be interpreted with little or no confusion. Sometimes that means being direct and to the point. Sometimes that means adding a lot of details. Conveying information efficiently through singular focus, avoiding overly complex messages, saying more with less, right? So things should be as simple as possible, but no simpler is generally a good rule for writing and communicating, right? We want to keep things as simple as possible, but how do we know we're going too simplistic? Well, it means that some of the message is being lost, right? If we go any simpler. Consistency, ensuring the core meaning remains the same across messages, across channels, across media, across time. This could be something that would be more important for like a corporation or organization. They're trying to be consistent in their communications about a particular topic, about new product line, or about how they're managing a certain crisis, and considering your audience. Obviously, good communication considers the audience's capacity to understand, their interest in the topic, their motivations, things like that, their experiences. Okay. 9.4, communication barriers. Some typical barriers to communication, as we talked about: noise, so anything that blocks, distorts, or changes the message the sender intended to communicate. Selective perception, the receiver receives a limited amount of the message based on their expectations and beliefs, usually to reinforce a pre-existing belief, right? So selective perception is really just perception, because perception is always happening. Perception always involves amount of selection. So people are never sort of objectively receiving a message. They're always perceiving it through the particular rose-colored glasses that they wear, and everyone has a slightly different shade of rose-colored glasses, or maybe a different color. Misperception, receiver does not understand the message in the way the sender intended. Filtering, information is intentionally withheld by the sender or ignored or distorted in a way that influences the message received. Information overload, an abundance of information can make it difficult to process all of it, making clarity and conciseness important in preventing this. Culture is willing and allowed to communicate to whom, and may limit how messages can be sent. And cultural differences. Different national cultures have different norms and ways of expressing information and ideas. Cultural differences. Words and gestures can mean different things in different cultures. Low context cultures, these are cultures that rely on the words themselves to convey meaning. So this is typically Western European, quote unquote Western. I'm going to stop using that term for various reasons. But there is actually no such thing as Western civilization. It is connected to ancient Middle Eastern African civilizations. It's really an outcropping of them. But we could say European cultures tend to be low context cultures. Communication is very direct. Most other more traditional cultures, Asian cultures have been studied a lot in, are more high context cultures, where the expectation is that the list receiver is supposed to pick up on very subtle cues. So a person might be saying, yeah, we'll definitely do that for you, but with other ways in their body language and other kind of words they're saying, they're actually kind of saying, no, we won't do that for you. Lack of cultural understanding is the biggest challenge in communicating with people around the world. Overcoming barriers to communication. Approaches to overcome communication barriers. Training on effective communication and listening strategies. Cross-cultural training to recognize cultural communication patterns. Changing organizational communication styles to remove communication barriers. And flatten communication structure to decrease distortion. So, I mean, this is sort of kind of cookie cutter solutions, right? These are some general principles. Communication is complex. Every sort of pair of individuals communicating bring a particular dynamic to it. The most important thing for good communication is effort, right? A desire to understand the other person or a desire to genuinely communicate effectively, right? And with that, assuming you have the basic skills, communication can take place. So, but acquiring those skills also comes down to desire and effort. So really, it's that desire and effort to communicate is probably the most important thing, in my opinion. All right, let's talk about media richness. What does this mean? Different mediums, different media can communicate in different ways, right? You can communicate, if you draw a picture for someone, that's going to communicate something versus a handwritten note versus a text message, right? So, or me to make it more simple, a voice note on someone's phone versus a text message, right? Obviously, there's more richness in a voice note than a text message because you can convey so much with the way you're talking and that you can't necessarily in texting. Okay, media richness, the ability to communicate, the ability of a communication medium to carry nonverbal cues, provide rapid feedback, convey personality traits, and support the use of natural language. Interactivity, or the availability of feedback, the ability to transmit multiple cues, such as physical presence, voice inflection, nonverbal cues, and pictures. Language variety, for conveying a broad set of concepts and ideas. The personal focus of the medium, or the degree to which allows the expression of emotions and other social cues. And right, and the media richness is not it's not the same for everyone, right? If someone's an amazing artist, they can convey a lot more in a picture they draw of their boyfriend or their girlfriend than someone who can't do much more than a stick figure, right? Not to say you shouldn't draw pictures for people if you're not a great artist, but obviously having a certain skill in a particular area is going to allow you to convey more richness in that. Okay, so what are the types of communications that are common in organizations? We've got face-to-face, video conferences, telephone, instant messaging, email, personal written correspondence, and formal written correspondence. Right? So face-to-face is going to be the highest in terms of richness because of things like language variety, personal focus, number of cues, feedback availability. Then you've got video conferences. Then you've got telephone, instant messaging, email, personal written correspondence, and a formal written correspondence. So these two highs are not exactly the same, and these two lows are not exactly the same. These two are not exactly the same. So everything's high, low, moderate, but there's also variation within that. Okay, communication styles, 9.6. So broadly speaking, two kinds of communication are task and relationship-oriented communication. This is true in a relationship, um, but this is especially important to understand this distinction in the context of an organization, because organizations can, if you're a leader or a manager or the organization as a whole, the task communication has to happen. The relationship communication doesn't necessarily have to happen, but it's also really important. So understanding this distinction can help you kind of realize, okay, maybe I'm focusing too much on the task communication and not enough on the relationship part. Okay, so task-oriented communication is communicating what the receiver is expected to do, when and where to do it, how to get it done, enhance efficiency, goal clarity, etc. Basically, this is like, this is what I want you to do, this is how I want you to do it, this is when I want you to do it by. Relationship-oriented communication is communicating in a way that is employee-focused and intended to develop trust and commitment and cooperation when a manager provides positive feedback or appreciation to a subordinate. So say you're a manager and person comes in from work today, you could just be like, okay, here are your tasks. I want this done by this time and this done by that time. See you later. Or you could be like, hey, Joe, so good to see you. Give me 5. Hey, what's up? How you doing? Did you watch the ball game last night? Or, or, or it's, hey, Joe, how's your kid doing? Is she feeling any better? Is she still sick? Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. And then, talk for a few minutes, and then it's like, okay, well, good luck, man. I hope that worked out for you. Here's what I need you to do today, right? So those two things are going to have a profound difference. And then throughout the day, you can either just ask the person how their tasks are going, or you can, you know, talk to them about their mood. How you feeling? You doing okay? Need a little break? Need some water? Etc. All right, communication styles, way in which people interact and exchange information with others. Passive communication would be avoiding conflict and prioritizing the needs and desires of others over one's own desires and needs. Passive aggressive style is appearing cooperative but silently feeling or doing the opposite. An assertive communication style is openly communicating one's needs, desires, and ideas while considering the needs of others and not being overbearing. And then aggressive communication style is dominating or controlling others, blaming, intimidating, criticizing, threatening, or attacking them. So obviously we want to fall into this bucket as much as possible, which is openly communicating our needs and desires while considering the needs of others, right? These other ones sort of go astray in different ways. These are kind of all paths or habits we want to try and avoid, but it's a challenge. And for each person may have typically maybe one or two of these. Maybe one person tends to fall into this passive communication style, one person tends to fall into a passive aggressive style based on childhood experiences and habits and past relationships, or maybe person might go back and forth between aggressive and passive aggressive, or so we can sort of, by observing ourselves, by going to therapy, by trying to get better at communication, cultivating self-awareness, we can sort of figure out what our personal communication style is and then work on it. Okay, so that is actually it for this chapter, a little bit of a shorter one. Super important stuff. I encourage everyone to try to get better at communicating, because so much of success in life depends on it. Long-term relationships, it all comes down to communication, or not. A lot of it comes down to communication. So that's something everyone wants, is healthy long-term relationships, romantic friendships, good relationships with your parents, and everyone wants career success, right? All those things we want, we have to be able to effectively communicate to get. So always good to work on that stuff and learn more about it. So hopefully this is just an introduction for you all, and you can kind of begin your communication journey of learning to become a more effective communicator. All right, I will talk to you all